I really don't want to hear another one.
Okay.
I really don't want to hear more, thank you.
I hear you loud and clear. Stop! Get away from her!
Ready for a new dose of SpongeBob animation errors? Well, pick some snacks and relax, because here we bring you some of the funniest animation errors that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1, Opposite Day. Have you ever heard about Opposite Day? Well, we didn't know about it either until we watched this cool Season 1 episode. We've seen many Squidward plans that have failed over the show's 20-plus year history, but little did we know that he tried to create Opposite Day. In this episode, Squidward tried to fool both SpongeBob and Patrick by making them believe that there was a day named Opposite Day. During this festivity, everyone should behave in the opposite way that they used to, and much to Squidward's surprise, it didn't have a good ending for him, because both Patrick and SpongeBob started to copy his behavior. And now let's move into some animation errors.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday, Squidward! Yeah! So
We found something strange right at the beginning of the episode. Well, we are pretty sure that unless you have some really precise eyes, you might have missed this one mistake, so here we are to tell you where it is. In this scene, Squidward achieved a very hard task, making SpongeBob and Patrick walk out of his house. This is such a great achievement that some confetti is thrown when both of our protagonists leave his home. If you take a close look at that confetti, you'll notice one very specific thing. When the confetti's up in the air, it is green, but the color changes to blue as soon as the confetti touches the ground. This might be a small error, but it is quite different from the ones we usually show.
Happy Opposite Day, Squidward! We hate you!
Let me show you guys how much I hate you!
SpongeBob used his belt to imitate Squidward, didn't he? Well, one key part of the episode is that due to acting the opposite way that he usually does, he puts his belt around his head to make his face more similar to Squidward's. This close-up of SpongeBob's waist is a bit strange because even though he has his belt wrapped around his head, we can see that the belt is clearly tied to his waist where it should be. Seems like someone forgot about this little detail. Number 2, Handemonium. Plankton has had many villainous plans during his tenure as Bikini Bottom's main villain, right? Well, this time he had a giant glove wreaking havoc all over the city. He was lucky that SpongeBob was able to help him to stop this madness, because we were really close to seeing Bikini Bottom's end. We don't want to spoil any more things about this episode's plot, but we really recommend you watch it because it's a really funny story that you shouldn't miss out on. Let's look at some animation errors. Well, if watching a walking glove wasn't strange enough, this scene also came with a very small animation error. In this scene, Plankton tries to assault the Krusty Krab in an effort to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula, and to achieve that, he uses a gigantic phantom glove. All was going as he planned until the glove decided to turn himself against Plankton and leave him alone, throwing him into a pot of hot sauce and leaving him to his own demise. The strange thing is that when the glove is leaving the Krusty Krab, the chum bucket is nowhere to be seen on the outside of Bikini Bottom's outskirts. Plankton was so focused on stealing the secret formula that he nearly lost his own restaurant. Wow, Mr. Yellow Teeth struck again. As we told you before, Plankton needed some help to end the glove's reign of terror. And who would help him better than SpongeBob? In this scene, we see that SpongeBob also found a handy friend to combat the enormous glove that Plankton created. Well, in this scene, when we see both of them in the roller coaster ready to fight the glove, we see that SpongeBob's teeth change color for a brief second, turning into a yellowish color for a couple of frames. Even the best episodes are filled with animation errors. Number 3, the masterpiece. It seems like Mr. Krabs' vanity doesn't know any limits. In this episode from the 7th season of the show, Mr. Krabs discovers that there's a new restaurant in town that threatens the success of the Krusty Krabs in the city. Being the egotistical crab that he is, he thinks about one strange solution to catch the attention of many new customers. He tells Squidward to sculpt a statue of his very own self. Now let's look at some animation errors.
Patrons, spring forth! The Krusty Krab will now seat you.
All right, you landlubbers, get the lead! Neptune's jewels!
Well, this wasn't the first time that the chum bucket disappeared in this video. Right at the start of the episode, when SpongeBob opens Krusty Krab's door, he discovers that there's absolutely no one waiting outside. Much to his surprise, this is not the only thing that's wrong in this video, because if you take a quick look at the horizon, the chum bucket is nowhere to be seen. This is strange, because like we said, it is not the first time that Plankton's restaurant gets lost or disappears during a SpongeBob episode. But every time counts, and it's a cool moment to highlight.
Okay, let's see it. Make sure you wear sunglasses or you may be blinded by my genius.
For sure, Mr. Krabs put a lot of effort into having the best statue ever. Squidward created a very cool statue based on Mr. Krabs, but even if the statue is called the masterpiece, this scene might not be a masterpiece at all. When we see Mr. Krabs posing for Squidward so he can sculpt the figure, he's completely naked, but if we take a look at what happens when Mr. Krabs is running to see the final result of the sculpture, he is fully dressed and wearing all his clothes. Maybe Krabs was lightning fast trying to dress himself, or maybe animators forgot that he could pose naked. In any case, it's a good thing to take into account in a cool episode. Number 4, Pat-Nocchio. You might have heard about the name Pinocchio, but what about Pat-Nocchio? This mischievous plankton scheme paid homage to the famous story of Pinocchio, but with very different outcomes. In this episode, Plankton used Patrick's relationship to go after Pearl so he could find a patty that Pearl found on the ground. Again, this is Plankton trying to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula, but this time he tried to steal it directly from Krab's daughter. But let's see if we found any animation errors.
Stealing our phone, Pop? Let me at him, let me at him!
Get him, Pinocchio!
We haven't talked about any missing limbs today, have we? Well, this animation error is a little bit hard to find, but we have very trained eyes and we found something here. When Plankton has the Krabby Patty in his hands and he's on Patrick's shoulder, his mouth disappears for a moment. Now Plankton can't even talk. Such a cool error.
I should do what the voice tells me to do?
Now that's a smart little sea star.
Do you know that SpongeBob is capable of trespassing against other people? In case you don't, here's a clip that demonstrates it. In this scene, when Patrick and SpongeBob are talking on the outside of the Krusty Krab, we see our protagonist walking through his best friend like he's a ghost. That SpongeBob never ceases to surprise us. Number 5, Copy Bob Ditto Pants. Can you imagine how life would be if we had 2 SpongeBobs? In this episode, Plankton's schemes go as far as cloning SpongeBob. We don't want to spoil this impressive scheme, but we are going directly for the animation errors.
Morning.
Whatever. said whatever. There's only one explanation. I'm still in bed.
SpongeBob may have been cloned in this episode, but while something is duplicated, others disappear. In this scene, we see that Squidward has one cup next to him, right? Well, this is strange because just a couple frames later, the cup disappears and appears right away. Squidward was experiencing a real nightmare by having two SpongeBobs at work, but these errors make it even worse.
I am a unique snowflake, and snowflakes don't stomp, they skip!
Again, the Krusty Krab is the victim of many animation errors in this episode. Here in this scene, SpongeBob loyalists will for sure notice that something is missing. Well, in case you haven't, when SpongeBob is running on the outside of the Krusty Krab, the restaurant's big sign is nowhere to be seen. Maybe two SpongeBobs were too much to animate and the animators forgot about other things. Fasten your seatbelts because here are some mistakes that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1, to SquarePants or not to SquarePants. The quote, "to be or not to be," is one of the most famous affirmations in human history, so famous that even SpongeBob's animators decided to name an episode after that. Let's take a look at some of the best moments of the episode. Well, this episode, it's all about SpongeBob changing his trademark SquarePants to newer, round ones, causing everyone in Bikini Bottom to not recognize him anymore. So sad for poor SpongeBob. But even if this episode presents us with a different outfit for Bob, we wanted to showcase some concrete scenes. Let's watch them together.
And I got the job!
Oh, boy.
My first day on the job, I am so excited! Woo-hoo!
Did you find something here? Well, it's hard, but you should take another look to see if you're able to see one error. This one is for SpongeBob's experts, but if you look closely at SpongeBob's hat, there's a brief frame in which the black ringish part from our protagonist's hat changes from blue to black. To be honest, this is really fitting with this episode's context because not only SpongeBob's pants are changing design in this episode, but we're not leaving this episode, at least not for now.
Get to work! I'm used to Squidward sleeping on the job, but I expect more from you, Mr. SquarePants.
I am not SpongeBob SquarePants, Mr. Krab.
Well, we're used to seeing Mr. Krabs in some strange situations, but have you seen something strange regarding him in this scene? Just watch it carefully and tell us if you were able to find something. In case you haven't, when Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob that his pants look round instead of squared, there's a moment when the space between his eyes turns completely white. These two are really hard to find, but we wanted to make things hard for you on this episode. Number 2, Bummer Vacation. Who's ready for a big vacation? We know that SpongeBob is a real workhorse, but in this episode, Mr. Krabs forced him to take some vacation and rest a little bit. Maybe the focus of this episode was to get some rest for SpongeBob, but the animators even took some rest for themselves, because we found some cheesy scenes on this one.
You can't do that! We need to turn up the grill to exactly 298 degrees Fahrenheit.
Seems like Krusty Krab's kitchen isn't the same without SpongeBob, and this scene is a real representation of this. Actually, we hope that you've noticed something strange on this one because it's maybe hard to find, but we discovered an error located on the grills. When SpongeBob enters the kitchen, Patrick is cooking some Krabby Patties, but when SpongeBob goes to check what is happening with the grills, no patties are to be found. Well, for sure they miss SpongeBob at work. But let's keep looking at this episode.
Boy, you're on Krusty Krab property. Back it up. Further. Further.
Further.
Is something missing here? This is one of the most recurrent errors that we can find in SpongeBob. But again, here, when Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to walk away from the Krusty Krab, we see a shot of SpongeBob outside his usual restaurant, and the chum bucket is missing again. Well, many people usually forget about how important plankton is to this series, but for sure, this is a low blow to Bikini Bottom's evil villain. We wanted to highlight one more error before leaving this episode. SpongeBob might be so obsessed with his job that he behaves like a dog when he sees those brilliant spatulas shining. But not only that, this behavior came with some animation errors itself. In this scene where both SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are in the car looking at these spatulas, SpongeBob is so excited that even his corneas changed their color for a second. He for sure needed some vacation. Number 3, pet or pests. Finding a great partner for Gary hasn't ever been an easy task for SpongeBob. Much like in the episode A Friend for Gary, we found some instances in which SpongeBob has adopted some friends to spend time with Gary, but there hasn't been a single time where this has ended in a good way. Let's watch some cool scenes from the episode.
All right, Gary. Just so there isn't any more upset, I'm going to ask that you sleep on the guest newspaper tonight. And Mr. Wormsley is going to be sleeping in here with me. Now, Gary, there's no need for protest.
It's possible that you missed one little detail in this scene, but let's look at it again. Right after SpongeBob comes back to his house, he turns a light on in his guest room, but some moments after, we find SpongeBob talking to Gary about how disappointed he is with the situation with the worm. This leads SpongeBob to move Gary to the same guest room where he turned the light on, but now there's no light on it. Such a weird thing to find. Let's jump to another curious moment we found in this episode. Have you found something strange here? Well, usually any vehicle needs to be driven by someone, right? In this scene where SpongeBob tries to save all the worms from being run over by the truck, we find that the truck didn't have any driver on it. It was moving by itself. Even if this is weird, SpongeBob brought his heroic spirit to the scene and saved those little worms from a very painful accident. Number 4, sing a song for Patrick. Who doesn't like a good music episode? Well, Patrick might have many talents himself, but here he decides to be a great singer and submit a song to a famous label located at Bikini Bottom. But let's check some curious scenes.
It's working!
Patrick, don't sprain yourself.
Oh, what's going on?
Patrick might be using a lot of his mental capacity here, but we're here for a little detail that happens in the back of the room. If you were looking at the door while Patrick was thinking, there was no one to be seen there. But a couple moments after, the door is closed and SpongeBob is knocking that door. Let's dedicate a little moment to secondaries before we leave this episode.
Let's get him, boys! You know, it's not that bad.
Fred, the fish that is ahead of everyone, is the victim of some animation errors in this episode. In some scenes, he's wearing brown jeans, while in others, his jeans are blue. Maybe animators forgot about animating secondaries in a proper way. Number 5, 20,000 patties under the sea. Do you imagine SpongeBob working in a traveling restaurant? Well, this episode might put SpongeBob in a strange situation, but not without its fair share of errors.
Are you sure you're not trying to say Roger?
Oh, wait, I got it!
Ringo.
Patrick, we have visual contact.
If you've seen this scene right at the start of the episode, you'll probably have seen SpongeBob glasses, right? Well, in the starting moments from the episode, the shape of SpongeBob's glasses changes from scene to scene. In some moments, they're circular, and in others, they're squared. Animators love to change SpongeBob's outfit, but we've found a very strange scene in this episode. What do you think about this?
Yes!
more hole's been breached! You know what that means? No!
This is more a logical error than an animation error itself, but when SpongeBob and Patrick's submarine breaks, water starts to flood its insides, much to everyone's surprise. This is weird because if the submarine didn't have water inside, both SpongeBob and Patrick wouldn't be able to breathe. This is such a strange thing if you think about it. Get ready, because here are some Easter eggs that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1, rule of dumb. Patrick discovered his royal blood in this episode and ended up being a really bad monarch. Let's take a look at some of the best moments of the episode. A starfish from the royal ministry comes to visit Patrick for a special delivery, but Patrick initially mistakes him for a mad librarian and hides. This starfish announces that he has a gift for Patrick, but being the strange guy he is, he does not trust him and hides. Later on in the episode, we will discover that this present was a present for Patrick, and this is a demonstration that Patrick has an uncovered tree showing Patrick to be descended from a king, thus making him the official king. Here, with all this royal implication, we find one of the first Easter eggs that are in this episode. One of the characters that we can see is named Yorick. Why is this important? Being a royal-flavored episode, Yorick is a character that appeared in one of the most important plays in history, Hamlet. What a cool reference! But this is not the only historical or philosophical reference that we can find in this episode. Let's take a look at another one. At the end of the episode, when Patrick gives his crown back, the man from the royal ministry says the famous phrase, "With great power comes great possibility." This is a phrase from French philosopher Voltaire. This phrase is used in many cartoon media and was famous due to its use in films, much like Spider-Man. Well, this is a reflection of Patrick not being a great king at all, but hey, being a king is not easy after all. Number 2, porous pockets. From Patrick becoming a king to SpongeBob becoming super wealthy, it seems like everybody is changing their social position in SpongeBob. In this episode, both SpongeBob and Patrick find a clam choking on a pearl. Being the great neighbors they are, they help this mysterious clam, and they mistake the pearl for a volleyball. After they go to a volleyball court, some workers offer a small fortune to SpongeBob for it. This small fortune ended up being some billions of dollars that were delivered to SpongeBob. After this, SpongeBob and Patrick use a portion of the money to buy lifetime supplies of strawberry gum at the Bikini Bottom Mall. Because who doesn't like an endless supply of treats for their whole life? Later, at an ice cream stand, SpongeBob overhears another fish complaining that he is short on change. So he offers the fish money, and they become his friends. SpongeBob is so overtaken by fame that he forgets Patrick is his best friend, and he keeps giving money to his rich friends. Sadly, SpongeBob got blinded by the money and forgot who his best friend was. Pretty bad, SpongeBob. With all the themes of the episode reviewed, let's check out the cultural references we were able to find here. The episode itself is a parody of the parable of the prodigal son, in which the protagonist, reflected in the figure of SpongeBob, gains an increasingly large amount of wealth, but then they quickly lose it all and have to go back to their former life. This also is really bad, since SpongeBob nearly lost his friendship with Patrick due to this. Like we said before, with great power or great wealth comes a great responsibility. Also, there is a moment in which the characters use a movement known as the slime lick maneuver. This is a reference to the famous Heimlich maneuver, which is used to help a choking person, or in this case, a choking animal. It's so funny. Number 3, the Krabby Chronicle. Did you know that the Krusty Krab had its own newspaper? Well, in this classic from Season 6, Mr. Krabs sends SpongeBob to write juicy stories for his newspaper. At the start of the episode, Mr. Krabs finds out that there have been no new customers, and he invested some money in putting an ad in the local newspaper about the Krusty Krab. Being as careful with his money as he is, he sees that people are buying a different newspaper called the Bottom Feeder. A buyer informs him that the newspaper in which he put his ad is no longer interesting and that the stories that they write are not true. Due to this, Mr. Krabs decides to make his own newspaper, and who would be a better writer to choose than SpongeBob himself, giving him newer responsibilities. We found some special moments in this episode, so let's look at them. During this episode, there is a board over the Krusty Krab sign that reads, "Over 8 bajillion served." This is a reference to the McDonald's signs, which read billions and billions served. For sure, Mr. Krabs has his business in a pretty good position, because he compares himself to real-life fast food giants like McDonald's. Also, we have one reference to an old SpongeBob episode, because the health inspector who shuts down the chum bucket is the same one who appears in the episode Nasty Patty, making him a funny returning character. Number 4, All That Glitters. Poor SpongeBob, he broke his spatula on this one. During the start of this episode, SpongeBob is having an intense day at work in the Krusty Krab. Suddenly, one customer orders a monster Krabby Patty, and SpongeBob tries to flip it, resulting in his spatula breaking. This is pretty bad because without his trademark spatula, SpongeBob loses all his powers to be a great chef. Even if this looks like a pretty big drama to deal with, we found very interesting moments in this episode. In one moment of the episode, SpongeBob breaks the fourth wall, mentioning the episode this happens when suddenly another SpongeBob arises from the floor and says the phrase, "All that glitters isn't gold." Seems like SpongeBob has a big connection with his audience. Also, continuing with the episode, some theories say that the hand that delivers the monster Krabby Patty might belong to the show's animatic editor, Steve Downes. Such cool details we found in this one. Number 5, A Flea in Her Dome. Everyone loves to come back to his roots, right? Well, in this episode, Sandy goes back to Texas and brings a flea back to her dome. This might sound funny, but bringing that flea to Bikini Bottom causes Sandy to scratch and bite her fur, much to Sandy's annoyance. Later on, we discover that this was due to the same flea who Sandy brought with herself after visiting a science convention, causing big trouble all around Bikini Bottom. But even if this flea was running rampant across Bikini Bottom, we found some really interesting details in this episode. Let's look at them. The scene in which SpongeBob and Patrick cry tears on each other is similar to a scene that we were able to see in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, where the same thing happens to them after they miss the paddy wagon. Also, in the scene in which Squidward is power walking, the song he's listening to is a reference to a jazz song that you can find in a horror movie classic known as The Thing. It's so cool that scriptwriters and animators pay homage to some cult classics like this. Well, for today, we bring you a very special topic. Get ready, because here are some strange theories you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1, a nuclear experiment? The internet is home to many SpongeBob-related stories, especially those which try to find exactly where Bikini Bottom is located. If you've invested some of your time investigating those theories, you'll have found that every indication leads us to one special place. One of the most popular SpongeBob SquarePants theories claims that Bikini Bottom is located right underneath Bikini Atoll. To give you more context about why this this is a very important place. Bikini Atoll was chosen by the United States as a nuclear weapon testing site. The United States used these islands to experiment with nuclear weapons more than 20 times, making it a radiation-heavy site. So maybe that's why we see both SpongeBob and his friends having mutations with their bodies and minds warped by the nuclear waste above, thus giving birth to our favorite characters. We, of course, are really against using any natural locations to make experiments, but this is a great way to explain the origin of Bikini Bottom's population. In many websites, this is also used to explain why SpongeBob has such a weird way of clothing himself, since it looks like his clothes have a correlation with the times in which those experiments were made, and also why Squidward's clothes look like the ones from our granddads. Number 2, a problem of global warming. Jumping from one natural disaster to another, we're pretty sure that everyone is aware of what's going on with global warming and its consequences, right? Well, it seems that many people associate SpongeBob SquarePants with a metaphor of how global warming is influencing the world. Let me explain. Imagine that SpongeBob is the representation of human waste and pollution. Then, Mr. Krabs, as SpongeBob's big and cruel boss, is a representation of the large corporations that cause pollution. And Patrick, as SpongeBob's best friend, represents the Western civilization. All of this is due to his laziness and innocence, representing the personality of those who aren't aware enough. Finally, Squidward represents all those who call for action against climate change. But because no one shares his interests, he's constantly ignored, creating a bad relationship between him and other inhabitants of Bikini Bottom. We hope that this theory makes you think about all these environmental problems because they are really serious. That's why we're sure that both writers and animators are pretty concerned with this and try to make others think about how dangerous global warming can be. Number 3, what are the Krabby Patties made of? During the show's 20-plus years of history, there has been one question lurking all around Bikini Bottom. What are the Krabby Patties made of? What is it that makes Krabby Patties so delicious? As SpongeBob fans that we are, we know that it all comes down to a secret ingredient that only Mr. Krabs knows, and there might be a sinister reason why he's keeping it hidden from everyone. Many people on the internet believe Mr. Krabs is a cannibal who makes his burgers with crab meat. Some even say that he is the murderer of many of his friends. That would explain why Mr. Krabs is seemingly the only crab in town, and some even speculate that the long-absent Mrs. Krabs was a victim of his scheme. Do you imagine that Mr. Krabs killed his own wife to make one of Bikini Bottom's most famous burgers? This is for sure a nightmare-fueled story, ideal for Halloween season. But Mr. Krabs being a cannibal is not the only theory that is built around what the secret ingredient of the Krabby Patties is. We also found another theory that is also interesting. Let's check that out. What if Mr. Krabs only serves burgers that taste like crab? This argument claims that Mr. Krabs engineered a convincing imitation of crab meat, and that is the true key to his success. Crustacean customers get all the great seafood taste without the soul-sucking guilt of eating their best friends. It's why they prefer the crusty crab to the rival chum bucket, which serves real chum, which is non-imitation fish parts. Well, much like in the real world, where some people prefer to be vegan or vegetarian, it seems like some people are also worried about the health of Bikini Bottom's population. Number 4, SpongeBob is a real prodigy. If you've been watching the show for a long time, you've been able to see SpongeBob doing many things. How could this be? In various episodes, he can be seen mastering a variety of complex skills that range from sculpting to the development of a series of intricate bubble-blowing techniques. Also, we have seen him being a stunt double from many other professions. Here are some of them. Well, we have gathered information, and according to one Reddit user, it's because SpongeBob SquarePants is arguably the most gifted yet underachieving creature shown on TV. His reasoning to make this strong statement is that Bikini Bottom's resident sponge can pick up just about any skill on the fly, master it, and go on to produce something extraordinary with it. This might explain why the animators have put him through many difficult tasks in the show's lengthy history, and how SpongeBob has been able to finish all of them, and in most cases end up being victorious. Please tell us in the comments which are your favorite SpongeBob jobs and adventures. Number 5. The characters represent the 7 deadly sins. One of the most famous theories that runs deep on the internet is the one associating the 7 deadly sins with the main characters that we see in the show. In case you don't know, the 7 deadly sins are a group of vices that you can find in Christian teaching. They're a group of 7, which are pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. This theory went so far that SpongeBob's voice actor, Tom Kenny, had to do an interview to debunk it. Inside the debate, the community decided that each sin fit one character. The results were pride, Sandy. Pride is strongly associated with a deep satisfaction of individual achievements. During the series, Sandy is always proud of every invention she creates or how great her karate skills are, but always thinking about herself. Greed, Mr. Krabs. Greed is the most selfish desire for something, especially wealth or power. Well, I think there's no need to explain Mr. Krabs' passion for money, right? Lust, Pearl. Lust is known to be an intense sexual desire. There's many times where we see Pearl searching for the perfect boyfriend or even wanting to meet TV stars. Envy, Plankton. Envy is an insatiable desire that is based around wanting things that others have. This is another clear example because how many times have we seen Plankton trying to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula? Gluttony, Mrs. Puff. Gluttony is the overindulgence in food. There are some episodes in which writers have speculated about Mrs. Puff being obsessed with food. Wrath, Squidward. Wrath is uncontrolled feelings of anger and hatred. We always say that Squidward is not the happiest person in Bikini Bottom, and sometimes he even has problems controlling his anger. Sloth, Patrick. Sloth is excessive laziness. Outside of being SpongeBob's best friend, Patrick is known to be a really laid-back and lazy person, so much that it looks excessive. Depending on where you look at this theory, there are times where Gary is considered a great candidate for the position of gluttony too. Do you know that some of the scenes of the show didn't pass the final cut? Well, get comfortable, because here are some cut and deleted scenes that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1. Scaredy Pants. Halloween was just a month ago, but we would like to start this video with a small, terrifying story. Coming straight from the first season of the show, we present you Scaredy Pants. In this episode, SpongeBob has an encounter with the Flying Dutchman, and he ends up becoming a ghost for Halloween. But it's not the most terrifying thing that happened in this episode, because some scenes were so scary that they weren't shown on TV. In the initial plans for the episode, there was a scene in which a close-up of SpongeBob with his whole brain exposed was going to appear. This was due to the fact that the Flying Dutchman was going to remove SpongeBob's costume and left his brain totally exposed because his face was used to make his ghost costume earlier. This was so funny that even Bikini Bottom's most famous ghost ran away in complete terror. But let's continue with this episode. This episode also had a really cool detail deleted because after 2020, Nickelodeon USA decided to cut one of SpongeBob's last lines in the episode. This moment had SpongeBob saying, "Don't worry, it grows back," while the screen faded to black. This maybe was a decision caused by the timing in which this phrase was said, or maybe Nickelodeon didn't like it at all. The funny thing is, if we watch the scene and the episode on other streaming platforms, this moment is left untouched. What a great way to start our video. Number 2, procrastination. Jumping from the first season of the show to the second one, we have another episode filled with deleted scenes. In a Season 2 classic, SpongeBob procrastinates a lot on his way to finishing an essay for the boating school, which leads to some super funny moments, and he even dreams about his procrastination in his sleep. This SpongeBob guy is always thinking about work, no matter what. But like we said before, let's take a look at what was changed before this episode did get aired. The first thing is right at the moment where SpongeBob is sadly watching his friends playing on the outside while he's occupied trying to finish his rough homework. In the original cut of the episode, Patrick was rubbing Sandy's back with sun lotion and greeting SpongeBob to join this funny time alongside his beloved friends. This scene was finally deleted because, in some points of view, it looked like Patrick was trying to untie Sandy's bikini, which gave an unnecessary sexual tone to a friendly scene. The second one was tied to SpongeBob's bad ability as a driver. There was a scene in which SpongeBob imagines himself having a driving license and competing in a car race. The race ended up with SpongeBob crashing into the wall, and probably Nickelodeon thought that this was too violent for a kids show. And here comes the last one for this episode. Much like the first one, the episode had a scene in which some of the actions that were going on were a little too obscene. In this scene, while SpongeBob is practicing calisthenics, his nose was moving in a way that was considered unusual, and Nickelodeon decided to cut this from the final airing of this episode. Number 3, just one bite. Who would have thought that Squidward would end up addicted to Krabby Patties? Well, this happened in Season 3's episode Just One Bite, but this is not the strangest thing that happened in this episode for sure, because we have a lot of material to talk about. Let's watch it together.
There it is, unguarded. All I have to do is... Wait, it's too easy. Hey, this isn't water. This is... gas.
The scene that we just watched is one scene that didn't make the final cut of the episode, disappearing right before airing. In this scene, we see that Squidward is trying to calm his anxiety for a Krabby Patty by infiltrating Mr. Krabs' restaurant during the night. Poor Squidward, he's trying to steal things from his own workplace. Sure, his addiction was hard to deal with. During his incursion to the Krusty Krab, he finds that there's a trap on the door waiting for him. A cube filled with gasoline ready to fall onto whoever opens the restaurant's door without being careful enough, and some fire ready to light that gasoline and burn every intruder who tries to steal the secret formula. Mr. Krabs knows how to protect his formula from anything. This scene was cut from the final footage because the original air of the episode was during late 2001, right after the September 11th, 2001 attacks. This led Nickelodeon to classify this footage as inadequate for the moment and decided to erase this from their final plans for this adventure. Looking in retrospect, this was a clever decision to make and a very respectful one. Also, being a kids show, erasing this scene also prevented kids from playing with matches and fire. One wise message made by Nickelodeon. Number 4, SpongeBob in Random Land. We know that Squidward is a super rational person, right? But what would happen if he goes to Random Land? Well, the animators decided to put our favorite squid in this situation during the 12th season of the show, in one of its funniest episodes ever. In this episode, we have a very funny deleted scene that of course revolves around our protagonist in this episode, Squidward. There's a moment where Squidward opens a door, and as as soon as he opens it, he finds a room that is the same as his own bedroom, and suddenly it turns static and a Squidward with red eyes appears on screen, which will later create one of the creepiest theories in the show's history. This theory said that this red-eyed Squidward was Squidward after committing suicide. To run away from this, Nickelodeon decided to change this right before airing the episode and replacing this strange sight with a baby Squidward. The uncensored version was included on the Nick app until it was removed in July 2021. To this day, the original version can only be found in the Canadian channel YTV and the Latin American version of Nickelodeon. Number 5. I was a teenage Gary. Some videos ago, we talked about this episode as one of the creepiest episodes from SpongeBob SquarePants. But if watching SpongeBob turning himself into a snail was scary enough, we also found that this episode changed a little bit right before airing. Let's take a look at how the episode changed.
Meow, 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 meow.
Meow, 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 meow.
From 2020 onward, during the ending scene, we saw Squidward saying meow, 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 meow. But in the Nickelodeon USA editing of the show, the number of times he says meow is cut. This was made to synchronize the ending of the episode with the fading of the screen, which was clearly discordant. This may look strange, but in the digital and streaming releases of Amazon Prime, Paramount, and iTunes, this scene was left untouched. So there you have it. These are 5 deleted scenes that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. If you liked the video, please let us know in the comments so we can provide you with more SpongeBob content. Until the next time, goodbye!